neighborinos!
Dokily dokily.
Indeed, we reached 5,000 subs.
Oh my god!
And welcome to another video on the Simpsons Hit and Run. I'm aware I've been away for a few weeks now, but I wanted this video to be as good as it could be. And in the words of Marge,
Slow and steady wins the race.
first of all, a massive thank you to everyone who's seen my last video. I was not expecting the response to be as huge as it was, but wow, this has quickly become one of my most popular videos in such a short amount of time. I'm also very grateful for all the positive feedback.
That's Drambuie.
Including about the title, which I was admittedly quietly gloating about, although I'm not sure this dude got it. They're either praising the pun or simply not getting it. I can't really tell. Either way, I couldn't help but respond with,
That's the joke.
I really didn't mean to be a bitch about it, but I couldn't resist. I did also get one or two snide comments and personal slights from people. Not cool, guys.
I certainly hope someone stabs him in the eye.
Anyway, it's nice that a lot of you are really understanding that car models aren't exactly my forte, and it's prompted a lot of discussion about the origins of these vehicles. You might say my last video set the wheels in motion. Although the main objective of that video was to find the first appearances of the vehicles in the series, I did attempt to pinpoint the real-life inspiration behind a lot of them. Naturally, I was aware there would likely be some inaccuracies, so I've taken on board your feedback and have decided to attempt a more accurate, thorough rundown of all of the playable vehicles in the game, and their closest resemblances in real life.
Wow.
Now, I would recommend you watch my previous video if you haven't already, but since we're looking at all of the vehicles anyway, it's not strictly necessary.
Well, that's a relief.
Once again, there are probably going to be some inaccuracies. As you already know, I'm not the most knowledgeable about this stuff.
No matter how good you are at something, there's always about 1,000,000 people better than you.
But I have looked at a number of opinions, and I'm going to at least try and convey the most accurate real-life sources that I can.
Trying is the first step towards failure.
Yes, well, thank you for the words of encouragement, Homer. All the same, I'm aware a few of you will likely have some corrections for me.
Let me get old red.
Now, I have accumulated a bunch of opinions from the Simpsons wiki, the Simpsons Hit and Run wiki, the Internet Game Cars database, and your comments on the last video, some of which are rather lengthy.
I was elected to lead, not to read.
I'm also going to throw in some of my own interpretations. As is evident from my last video, I'm not always correct, especially when it comes to something that's outside of my area of expertise. But on looking into some of these suggestions, I don't totally agree with everything.
Don't get to the point, man!
Yes, well, in any case, I hope you find it interesting. And if you do enjoy the video, once again, please don't forget to like it. Now, on your marks.
3, 2, 1.
First of all, we have the family sedan. In my last video, I suggested this is likely derived from a 1981 Plymouth Reliant or a 1971 Plymouth Valiant, and I personally think it's most likely the latter. And some of you had some interesting stuff to say about this one. BMX Guy from New Zealand mentions the fact that at one point in the series, the car is revealed to have been made up of parts of old Soviet tanks, although I personally think this is simply for the purposes of a gag and nothing more.
Your car was built in Croatia. It's made from old Soviet tanks.
That Car Guy 2008 claims that while it looks like a Valiant from the front, from the back it looks like a DeVille. Now, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming you're referring to a Cadillac DeVille sedan here. And although the rear lights do look a little similar, I still think the rear lights of a Plymouth Valiant are a closer match.
Your ideas are intriguing to me, and I wish to subscribe to your newsletter.
Blue Wusky claims that the car is referred to as a 1979 Dodge in the series, and so assumes the vehicle is supposed to be a Dodge Dart. Now, I cannot recall the car ever being referred to as a Dodge in the show, but I could easily be wrong. I mean, have you seen how many episodes there are?
I don't have time for that.
I personally think the shape of this car is rather different to the one in the show. That said, I noted that some Dodge Dart convertible models actually look very similar to the family sedan in the game, and this is actually corroborated by users on the Internet Game Cars database, which we'll abbreviate to the IGCD from now on. It's a bit of a mouthful. Now, this similarity in appearance may just be coincidence. Queen Stodge suggests that the fact that the family sedan is an open-top convertible is simply because it was also a convertible in Road Rage.
Woohoo! Alright!
And as such, it might just bear a resemblance to the Dodge Dart coincidentally. Overall, since I think the family sedan in the series seems likely inspired by a Plymouth Valiant, I would argue that this is what it's supposed to be in the game.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
I don't agree to that.
Neither do I.
I understand why people are saying it might be a Dodge Dart, but I'm not convinced here.
People are gonna strongly disagree with me here, I can tell.
You picked the wrong guy to tangle with here, mate.
Now, I didn't actually mention what the Plough King might be based on in the last video, but according to the IGCD, it's derived from an Oshkosh W series. The reason I didn't feature this initially was because I couldn't find an exact likeness online. One of the closest models I could find was a 1960s plough truck, and I'm actually disappointed I couldn't find a closer likeness.
I tried my best and I failed.
There were some other vaguely similar models I found, but nothing that leapt out at me as being definitively that vehicle. Honestly, this was one of the most difficult to pinpoint.
Out of my way, Snowpoke!
And the Duff truck was another difficult one to research, as it just appears to be a generic box truck. The users on IGCD assert that this is a Ford Econoline E series, but it was very hard to find a truck the same shape as the Duff truck that wasn't a more recent model. The closest resemblance I found was a 1990 E350. There's also a number of other vans in the game that maintain the same basic shape as the Duff truck, and these are the Bone Storm truck, the Cube van, the Itchy and Scratchy the Movie van, and the Vote Quimby van.
Vote Quimby!
Speaking of the Vote Quimby van, this could easily be seen as a reference to Quimby's mayoral campaign in Season 6 episode Sideshow Bob Roberts.
Hey Beardo, vote Quimby.
Although the horn soundbite of him saying Vote Quimby always makes me think of Season 9's The Cartridge Family.
Vote Quimby.
So yeah, this is basically an episode references thing. This actually probably belongs more so in the previous video than this one. Oops.
This is neither the time nor the place.
The Surveillance van, meanwhile, is derived from a 1979 Chevrolet G10 van, although it does also bear some resemblance to a Chevrolet panel van. There are also several other vehicles in the game that are based on Chevrolet G10 vans, such as the pizza vans and the Sea Captain's Fish delivery vans. The ambulances too seem to be adapted from the same chassis, although I couldn't find an exact match.
For shame.
What I did note though is that the ambulances look a lot like the ones in the show, so it's possible they were just adapted from these appearances without any real thought as to what their closest real-life replicas might be.
Where to, Meg?
For the third time, the hospital. You're an ambulance, not a taxi.
Next up is Cletus's pickup truck, and you guys had some more things to say about this one. Dominator Legend mentions that a very similar truck appears in the episode Mr. Plow.
Can't trust a pig with watermelons, you know.
Oddly enough, I was going to mention this myself, but I wound up disregarding it, as I didn't think it to be relevant. But thinking about it, it does kind of look like an early prototypical version of Cletus's maroon truck. In the last video, I mentioned that the pickup truck is based on the Chevrolet Advanced design, but Stev suggests that it might actually be based on a Ford pickup truck from the early or mid-50s. But unless there's a specific model I've not been able to find, none of these look like Cletus's truck in my opinion. I'm gonna stand my ground here until proven otherwise. I'm pretty confident this is based on a Chevrolet Advanced design.
Oh, for the love of pound cake.
The last couple of cars here are the Electoris and the Speed Rocket.
And since these were covered in the last video, I'm going to speed through these, so to speak.
The Electoris is derived from the General Motors EV1, and a user by the name of Below very nicely confirms this is correct.
Guess that's one at least. Woo!
And the secret vehicle, the Speed Rocket, is based on the Blue Flame, which achieved the land speed record back in 1970.
It's a new record, sir.
Outstanding.
Next we have Bart's vehicles, starting with the Honor Roller, and this is one of very few cars in the game to not have a real-life counterpart, as it was custom made.
Damn it, just when we were on a roll.
But its appearance is clearly based on the NASA Space Shuttle.
Make rocket go now.
Then there's Mr. Plow. As I mentioned in the last video, this seems to be based on a 1989 Ford Ranger, and nobody has yet refuted this one. As a side note, there's also a generic vehicle seen driving around town that resembles a 1992 Ford Ranger.
Where'd you get that truck?
It fell off a truck. You know, a truck.
Now, the limo is an interesting one, or at least more interesting than I was expecting. I hope you agree. I claim that this was based on a ZIL 41047 limousine. However, Nick Rustison states that it's more likely just a generic limousine, also citing that the Russian limo I alluded to is basically a rip-off of the 1979 Mercury Grand Marquis. Alternatively, Packard Caribbean claims that it's based on a Lincoln Town Car, and JD968 agrees with this, adding that it's most like the 1985 real-life model. So yeah, although the limousines are very similar, it looks as though I may have been wrong on this one.
My bad!
What a 3-point turn up for the books.
The fire truck was also difficult to pinpoint, about as difficult as it was to pinpoint its first appearance in the series, and it's one of the few vehicles I didn't find very interesting to research, as so many fire trucks look alike, and I don't find the vehicle itself particularly interesting. The IGCD lists this particular fire truck as being an American LaFrance, and these are the closest matches I could find. I'm aware that neither one is an exact replica though. I'm afraid I'm uncertain if a specific model serves as inspiration here. Perhaps it's just loosely based on a standard fire truck, or derives inspiration from various models. If you think this is based on an actual existing model, feel free to leave a comment.
It'll be a cool thing to know, even if I don't have a burning desire to find out.
A few of you have pointed out that the World War II vehicle would likely not be a Jeep CJ, but a Willys MB. In any case, it's still a Jeep, obviously. Thanks to Drottor, Stewie Griffin, and Jonathan Lai for pointing this out. As for Mo's sedan, in the last video, I stated that it's based on a 1980 Pontiac Bonneville, but some other sources claim it's a 1979 Oldsmobile 98. I'll be honest, at first I thought these looked so similar that it could have been inspired by either, but on closer inspection, from behind it definitely looks more like the Oldsmobile. I am still a little uncertain though, as Mo's car looks to be taller and more box-shaped, and from the front it still looks like a Pontiac Bonneville to me. Again, this could easily be a composite of several vehicles, so it might actually be inspired by both.
Ooh, that's sweet.
In this level, we also encounter the cell phone users' cars, and although only one colour is used in the mission in which they are seen, there are actually 4 different coloured cars that can be driven after having entered the cheat code.
Hey, that's cheating!
They're still all the same model though, and DDF29 on the IGCD claims they might be a hybrid of a 1997 Lincoln Continental and a Honda. Personally, I think they look much more like the former. However, my initial thought was that they may be inspired by Bart's car in Season 7 episode Bart on the Road, which actually predates these models. I've since changed my mind about this though, since revisiting the episode. Any resemblance is more than likely a coincidence. Finally, the secret vehicle, the front end of the monorail, isn't inspired by any particular real-life monorail to my knowledge. It could be derived from any number of monorail systems, such as the Seattle Center monorail you see here.
Like I say, this is just an example of a monorail. It might not be based on this in particular, but I like to think I'm on the right, track.
Are you saying boo or boo earns?
Next we have Lisa's cars, beginning with the default Malibu Stacy convertible, which is based on a Chevrolet Corvette. Zemzio Cirrus states that they initially thought it was derived from a W20 generation Toyota MR2, and although this is incorrect, I see where you're coming from. Although personally, I think the later, sleeker turbo model bears more of a resemblance. But in any case, no, this is definitely a Corvette. Packard Caribbean points out that the image I used in the last video was a later model, and JD968 adds that since Malibu Stacy is a parody of Barbie, it would make sense for it to be based on a 1984 Corvette C4. Safebox Gaming claims that it's derived from a C1 Corvette, a much older model. And while I don't personally think this is the case, Nick Rustison also claims that the rear of the vehicle is inspired by a C1. So far the closest resemblance is the C4 Chevrolet Corvette, but the rear is a bit of a mystery to me. I couldn't find a Corvette with a rear like this one.
Don't ask me, I'm just a girl.
I do think the rear of the C1 is the closest match so far, but in my opinion it's not a perfect likeness. Now we have the school bus. In my last video, I used an image of a GMC B series, but once again, the IGCD disagrees with me on this one, and states that it's an International Harvester school bus. I'll be honest though, there are many different models for school buses, and they all look pretty similar.
I tried! Oh, Lord, how I did try.
It could easily be a composite in my opinion, or even just a generic school bus. Simpler than we're all thinking. Or should I say more elementary?
The donut truck is an International Harvester Metro, and I personally think the 1960s models most resemble this vehicle. All the others I looked at seemed too rounded to me, and I couldn't find an exact likeness.
Oh, nuts!
Now we have the nerd car again. And this one has aroused some confusion. Last time I stated that the Simpsons Hit and Run wiki claims that this is either based on a 1976 Chevrolet Chevette or a 1971 Ford Pinto. Some comments on the IGCD also suggest that it might be an AMC Pacer, and I have to say that all of these seem to be valid suggestions. Since the last video, I've actually changed my mind about this car. I initially said it looks more like the Chevette, but on closer inspection, I actually think it has more in common with the Ford Pinto. There were also a bunch of other suggestions for this one, but I don't think any of these are a match, I'm afraid.
Auto-Tune's animation studio comments that they thought it was an AMC Gremlin, and I thought this was noteworthy because I initially thought so myself. Seriously, you read my mind.
Yum 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 yum.
In fact, when I talked about Superintendent Chalmers' Honda, originally I was going to suggest that it might also be a recolored version of Hans Moleman's Gremlin, seen in Treehouse of Horror 4.
There's a gremlin on the side of the bus.
But since we already have a car based on a gremlin in the game, and it's a different shape, I figured this might disprove this theory. I still maintain that it's likely a Ford Pinto, although all of these are very similar in appearance.
As I keep saying though, I could easily be wrong. I am far from a car nerd.
Nerds are smart.
Next up we have Skinner's Sedan, based on a 1982 Dodge Aries. I still stand by this, although some of you have pointed out that the initial appearance of the car in Season 6 episode Bart's Comet clearly depicts the car as a Volvo, particularly identifiable by the grille. Thanks to Rare Gliscore 1 and Jordan Hines for pointing this out. Now, I do agree with this. When I watched the episode, I noted that the windows are also a little different to the in-game model. Jordan Hines suggests that the car in its initial appearance adopts the look of an early 200 series, while James Harrison also notes that the closest model to this car is possibly a 740 sedan. In any case, it's clearly a Volvo, and I think either assumption may be right. It's possible that the car adopts a more generic look to prevent it from bearing any resemblance to an actual Volvo. Whether it's intentional or not, the in-game model appears to be more like a Dodge Aries, despite the fact that it's clearly meant to be based on the car seen in the episode.
Makes sense to me.
There are some other generic Dodge Aries inspired vehicles in the game. There are a couple of sedans that are ever so slightly different in appearance, as well as the taxicab seen in level 2. And there's also the station wagon, based on the 1983 Dodge Aries wagon. In addition, there's also a very similar looking generic minivan, and this is derived from a Dodge Caravan. I'm glad I checked this, as I very nearly assumed it was also based on a wagon.
Thank goodness I dodged that bullet.
Then there's the book burning mobile, based on a Chevrolet step van.
Is that burning literature I smell?
The windows are a little different, but the general shape is the same. The Phineas Q Butterfat ice cream truck also appears to be a step van, albeit much smaller in scale.
Ice cream truck!
The secret car here is Nightboat, and since this isn't actually a car, I don't have anything to say about it. I don't know if it's based on a specific boat in terms of its appearance, I just know that its appearance in the series is a parody of 80s TV show Knight Rider.
Nightboat, the crime-solving boat.
And based on this scene in the show, I think determining what kind of speedboat this is would be impossible. At least for me, anyway. Don't get me wrong, with this video I wanted a challenge.
A challenge I could do.
Next we have the Canyonero, which you can see where the lovely Marge is standing.
Do you come with a car?
What's this one based on, you ask? Well, buckle your seatbelts, this is gonna be a bumpy ride. In my last video, I stated that it bears a resemblance to both the Jeep Wagoneer and an 80s Range Rover. Adam Floyd comments that he always saw the Canyonero as a Ford Explorer, citing the references to unexplained fires and the Canyonero's tendency to tip over. I will say that in appearance it's also similar, although there is already a generic vehicle in the game that seems to resemble a Ford Explorer, and the IGCD claims it's something else entirely, a Japanese model called the Isuzu Trooper. Meanwhile, Joe Neri argues that it bears a stronger resemblance to either a Chevrolet Tahoe or a Ford Expedition, and so many people have commented on this one with their own interpretations, so I think it's pretty clear that it's simply supposed to be a parody of SUVs generally, and as such may derive inspiration from any or indeed all of these. However, if you want my official interpretation, I've concluded that, in appearance, I think the Canyonero most resembles the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, although as I say, I don't think anybody is necessarily wrong here.
There you go. Wasn't that a simple explanation?
No, it's not. It's needlessly complicated.
Willie's tractor, meanwhile, is based on a Ford 3600, at least according to the IGCD, although someone in the comments argues that it's actually a Ford 1100, and I'm partly inclined to agree due to the shape of the front end and the size of the wheels. As stated in my last video, the Willie logo either side of the tractor is likely a reference to Willis Overland Motors.
Were it not a violation of God's law, I'd make you my wife. Mwah.
Now, there seems to be some debate about the Curator. In my last video, I mentioned that it's based on an Aston Martin DB2, but JD968 suggests that it's based on a 1955 MG MGA. I'm going to respectfully disagree here though. I still think it bears more of a resemblance to a DB2, and Sleep Kirby 6472 also agrees that it's an Aston Martin, so that makes two of us.
One for Martin, two for Martin.
As already stated, Comic Book Guy's Kremlin is based on an AMC GMC Gremlin, and the clown car is a customized Volkswagen Beetle. Krusty's limo also appears to be a stretched version of this. Thanks again to JD968 for pointing this out. Finally, the secret car here is the ATV quad bike, which is apparently based on a Yamaha Raptor, although I personally think it looks more like a Yamaha Warrior, but what do I know?
Nothing at all!
We then move on to Apu's level. As stated in the last video, the default Longhorn vehicle is based on the Pontiac Firebird in the show, with a change of design. Last time I voiced my confusion as to why the Longhorn has a different colour palette, when the car maintained its red paintwork in the Simpsons Road Rage.
Thank you, come again.
But Joe Apo points out that this repaint may be a reference to the Texas Longhorns, corroborated by the fact that the logo on the bonnet is very similar to the university logo. Oliver Price also suggests that the colour change is because the developers wanted the playable characters' cars to all be distinct from each other, and perhaps didn't want Apu's car to be red, as Bart's Farini in the following level is also red.
Makes sense.
The car built for Homer, meanwhile, is simply based on the model seen in the show.
I'm ruined!
But Nick Rustison claims that the inspiration behind the episode is the 1991 Chevrolet Caprice, whose design was similarly ridiculed, although I personally thought this was a reference to the Ford Edsel. In any case, the model itself is custom made for the TV show.
And thank goodness for that, because it's absolutely hideous.
We also have the Cola Truck, based on a 1995 GMC Top Kick. And now, oh boy, the police car. Oh man, the number of comments on this one. First of all, I think I got a little overly obsessed with depictions of the police cars in the show.
Honestly, I felt like I was going crazy looking through so many episodes, scrutinizing every tiny visual detail.
Man, that's classic compulsive behavior. Wow, free beer!
And yet, despite my thorough observations, ironically the image I included of the car's real-life basis was incorrect. And boy, were you guys adamant in making sure I knew this.
That's right. You're all angry, sick people.
The consensus seems to be that the police car is derived from a 1980s Ford LTD Crown Victoria. The IGCD claims that it's based on a 1983 model specifically, and although almost everyone is in agreement that the model originated in the 80s, several people claim it's a slightly later model. In any case, it's definitely a Ford LTD Crown Victoria, and not the later Crown Victoria Police Interceptor I showed in the last video.
I'm learning.
Thank you to Packard Caribbean, JD968, Nick Rustison, Eric Ward, Max the Protogen, Doc Rainbow, Patrick Polder, Crazy Twister, JR Burger 95, and Nightwolf 88 for correcting me on this one. That's a lot of names.
Message received and understood. Now please, for the love of God, stop!
People are always really glad when they're corrected.
There's also some irony here in the fact that this particular car is one of the most prolific in media, so I genuinely feel as though I deserve the stone of shame here.
Still not clean. Think your failure's still on me.
Moving swiftly along, Professor Frink's hover car seems to be at least partly inspired by the 1959 Cadillac Cyclone, although it has been customized. The in-game model is taller and, well, obviously it hovers.
And just to be clear, the Cadillac Cyclone was not capable of hovering.
No!
I know that's a shock.
As stated in the last video, El Carro Loco is based on a 1970 Chevrolet El Camino, and the secret car, the Obliteratortron, is derived from a Ford F-150. Obviously in the game, this is a monster truck, so it looks rather different to the image I've used here, but it looks as though the main body is the same, or at least similar. And finally in this level, we're introduced to the non-uplets minivan, which is based on a 1985 Chevrolet Astro.
That was some ride.
You're telling me?
As I said earlier, Bart's second default vehicle is the Farini. In the last video, I mentioned that it's based on the Ferrari 308 GTS, with some hints of a 1987 Ferrari F40. However, Ray's Racer comments that the Farini is more like a Ferrari F355 Berlinetta. To be honest, while there are similarities, I think it bears more of a resemblance to the other models. But once again, I think it borrows elements from Ferraris generally, so I don't think anybody is necessarily wrong here. It should also be noted that there is a black Farini in the game that's playable through the use of a cheat code.
I insist that we cheat.
The Globex Supervillain car is another custom-made vehicle, although some comments on the IGCD posit that it may be inspired by the Tucker Karaoke concept car. This might be a bit of a stretch though. I'd say this is coincidence.
If that don't put the dink in coinky dink.
The armored truck is based on a Ford F800, as is the Mr. Burns Casino truck, while the Chase sedan is based on a 1973 Ford LTD. As I said in my last video, video, Snake's Lil Bandits is based on a 1969 Dodge Charger RT, although I do think it also derives some inspiration from its appearance in Season 9 episode Royalty Bites, in which the car is based on a 1968 Pontiac Firebird. And thank you to Daniel Verstendig for providing another little interesting fact. The name Lil Bandits is inspired by the nickname Little Bastard that James Dean gave to his car.
He's a rebel, I tell you. A rebel without a cause.
As stated in the previous video, the 36 Stutz Bearcat is indeed based on an actual Stutz Bearcat sports car, although interestingly, Packard Caribbean states on the IGCD that the in-game model is in fact a 1916 Stutz Bearcat. Looking at this image, this indeed seems to be the case.
Very odd.
This level also features the only appearance of the milk truck, but it's in a bonus mission that you can only play once, and well...
Annoyingly, when I was recording game footage, my save file corrupted at this point in the game, so I didn't actually manage to record this mission. I'm not happy about it either, but hey, there's no use crying over spilled milk.
Spilled milk?
What can we do about it now? It's not like we can play the game over again.
I didn't think it was worth starting over just to record a milk truck, as I managed to get all of the other footage I needed. But fortunately, the truck can also be accessed via the All Vehicles cheat code.
I cheated!
This milk truck is derived from a vintage Divco 206 truck. Finally, in the last video, I stated that the Secret Planet hype car is a 1959 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz, although some sources claim it's a 1959 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. But the differences between these cars seem to be very minor. In any case, it's definitely a late 50s Cadillac.
Well, duh.
We now move on to the final level, and we start with Homer's 70s sports car, which I initially said was based on a Dodge Challenger or a Plymouth Barracuda. JD968 notes that the first appearance of the car in the series looks like a Plymouth Roadrunner, and Nick Rustison and Joe Neri also argue that this is what the vehicle most resembles. Nightwolf88 also adds that the car is too big to be a Challenger or a Barracuda. While I'm not disagreeing with you, I wouldn't get too hung up on sizes here. I definitely see a major resemblance to the Roadrunner, although I still think it might incorporate elements of the other models, regardless of their scale. Jeremy Tyler James claims the spoiler is lifted from the Dodge Charger's Daytona variant, while Adventurous Eddie suggests that it resembles an AMC Javelin, which I can kind of see, but I think the shape is too different and the model looks a little bulkier. In any case, it's likely a composite of various 70s sports cars, but I will concede that the Roadrunner is a contender for being the primary influence here. Well spotted, guys. Meep.
Since it's a sports car, it's much faster and controls much better than a family sedan, although that does mean it's not quite as sturdy.
Wait, merciful crap! My car!
As for the zombie car, this is largely custom made, adapted from the TV show, although the IGCD suggests that it's inspired by a Ford T-Bucket, and personally I think it looks a lot like the 1932 T-Bucket. Whether it's actually based on anything specific though, I'm not too sure. There are many potential inspirations, and I haven't got a clue where to start.
If someone wants to dive down that rabbit hole, be my guest. It's your funeral.
Speaking of funerals, we then have the hearse. The consensus seems to be that it's a 1963 Checker Superba, identifiable by the grille.
I think it might be a hybrid of this vehicle and an actual hearse, rather than a direct adaptation, although I'm not exactly, dead set on this.
MPG 272727 suggests that it's inspired by a Miller Meteor Sentinel ambulance, like the one seen in the Ghostbusters franchise. While I see what you mean, I personally think any resemblance here is a coincidence. The standard hearse seen driving around town, which I said was inspired by the hearse seen in Treehouse of Horror 8, seems to be derived from a Lincoln Town hearse, possibly from 1984 or 1988. And while we're on the subject of generic vehicles here, I just want to mention the coffin car. This is clearly a coffin, and as such I don't think it's necessarily based on anything pre-existing, but I swear I've seen its likeness somewhere else, either in a Simpsons episode or something it might be parodying. Otherwise, for now, I'm just going to assume it's custom made for the game. And there's also the Witch's Broom. I actually see this as a reference to Treehouse of Horror 8 again, with its similar presentation of green-skinned witches.
That's right. I'm a witch.
Although this could just be coincidence. There's also the Ghost Rowboat here, which is a boat. I don't think it's based on anything in particular though, I just think it's meant to look creepy. And speaking of cars not based on pre-existing models, the secret car in this level is the RC Buggy, and to my knowledge it's not based on anything, which makes it the only secret vehicle in the game to not be based on either something from the show or a vehicle in real life.
It's awfully small.
As for the hover bike, the consensus on IGCD is that it's a 1998 Honda Goldwing, although the first appearance of the bike in the series predates this by 3 years. However, there are many earlier models of Honda Goldwings, meaning it could easily be one of these. As a side note, I find it interesting that the hover bike in the show appears to have wheels, while the in-game model does not. I mean, they're pretty redundant on a hover bike anyway.
I could sure use that flying motorcycle now.
You had your chance.
In my last video, I mentioned that Mr. Burns' limo bears a resemblance to the Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn. The IGCD suggests that it could be a Rolls-Royce Phantom 2, although I personally think the Silver Dawn is more accurate despite the substantial similarities. In any case though, we agree it's inspired by Rolls-Royce cars. The Simpsons wiki meanwhile posits that it might be a Bugatti Royale, but I think this looks a little too lengthy, and the wheel arches protrude too much.
Again, this is just my opinion, so please, for the love of God, don't hate me.
You've made a powerful enemy today, my friend.
Interestingly, Mr. Burns himself refers to the car as a Bugatti in the show, although I'm not sure if this is canon or just a name used for a gag.
I just drove off in my Bugatti Sexarossa.
Now, the open-wheel race car is one of the best cars in the game for drag racing, and is one of the biggest sources of contention. I initially stated that this is based on the MP42, driven by Niki Lauda in the 1984 Brazilian Grand Prix. Stinky Roadhog 13 points out that the car was driven by both Lauda and Alan Prost for the entirety of the 1984 season. However, they also note that the car looks more like an MP45B or an MP46, and Joe Henderson also echoes the sentiment that it may be an MP46. Meanwhile, Speed Hunter and Millennial Chicken are certain that it's a Penske Indy car, and this is an opinion shared by users on the IGCD, who claim it's a 2002 Chevrolet Dallara IR02. And I have to say, it does indeed bear a striking resemblance, but the front of the car looks much more like the MP46 to me. Millennial Chicken is particularly adamant that it's not a Formula 1 car, but honestly, this looks incredibly similar to me. I feel like I'm in the minority here, but I genuinely think this more closely resembles a McLaren MP45B or an MP46.
Yeah, I already know I'm gonna get dragged for this opinion.
Oh, you better believe that's a pattern.
Miscellaneous.
Lastly, we have the remaining miscellaneous vehicles that I haven't mentioned already, either that you might see driving around town or accessible via a cheat code. First, there's the generic school bus seen in level 1, and this is loosely based on a Chevrolet G30 school bus. The nuclear waste pickup seen in level 4 is based on a Ford F100, while the garbage truck appears to be loosely based on a Peterbilt 320 octagonal garbage truck. These generic vehicles were harder to define, being as they all seem to be more loosely adapted than the main vehicles for obvious reasons. These vehicles are essentially filler, and in the case of the garbage truck, I actually think it's more so derived from the TV show model rather than being an exact replica of a real-life vehicle. The consensus is that this car most resembles a Geo Metro, but again, it's a little ambiguous.
Come on, man, move this thing.
I can't. It's a Geo.
The Simpsons Hit and Run wiki also suggests that it may be a 1998 Audi A3. I personally prefer the former suggestion, but in any case, I didn't want to get too hung up on these generic cars, as resemblances to real-life models may be purely coincidence.
Right. Coincidence.
And the Buzz Cola glass truck is most likely a Ford F-Series pickup.
Buzz Cola. There's a little boogie in every bottle.
There are also a couple of very similar sports cars seen around Springfield. This one is derived from a 1986 Toyota MR2, while this one is a 1992 Nissan 240SX, which I have to say looks and plays pretty damn good for a generic vehicle. And as for the last generic vehicle, I actually don't fully agree with the IGCD on this one. This car is listed as an early 90s Mercedes-Benz S-Class, and although I can kinda see some resemblance, it looks like an older model to me. The Simpsons Hit and Run wiki suggests it's a 1986 Mercedes-Benz W126 S-Class, which I think is much more accurate.
Oh, I concur. Word of day calendar.
The only other vehicle I can think of that I haven't mentioned is the red brick car, which is presumably an allusion to the test vehicle used in The Simpsons Road Rage, and is not based on anything in the real world.
And I think that's just about it. If you think I've missed anything, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into The Simpsons Hit and Run.
We knew you could do it!
I think it's about time I left the house.
Not natural light!
Really though, this video took a while. I genuinely can't believe we got to the end.
Attach the stone of triumph! Oh!
If you want to see some more content on the Simpsons Hit and Run, once again, let me know in the comments, along with any other requests you have.
It's raining men!
Until next time, farewell.
This is the end. My only friend, the end.
Hey everyone! As always, a massive thank you for watching, and I think it might be pretty obvious why this video took a little bit longer than the usual. Originally, this was just going to be a video addressing the corrections and responses to the autobiography video, but I decided to go a step further and try to identify every single playable vehicle in the game. I don't think I missed any, but if I did, as I say, let me know. Oh, and I'm waiting for someone to mention the coffin car. I have a feeling that's one I might be kicking myself over, like I did over Skinner's sedan. Anyway, a huge thank you also for 5,000 subs. The channel has grown fairly rapidly over the last couple of months. If you'd like to help the channel, feel free to support me on Patreon. It's much appreciated if you do, but no pressure if you don't, obviously. I've got another game recording underway, although I really wanted to do a Halloween episode this year, as I usually do. I'm not sure I'll have enough time to work on it though, we'll see. In any case, I will see you soon. Now I'm gonna go lie down. Bye bye for now!
She's been crushed.